The Stadiumville project will reside primarily on two online platforms. One is the Korsakov program, which allows for the creation of interactive database films, and then the other is ATLmaps. On the ATLmaps platform, users will be able to interact with a growing number of layers, some of them archival map layers and others pinpoint projects on the study area. Stadiumville became one of the first test cases for the ATLmaps platform because it allowed us to show how seemingly unrelated layers of information might actually be related when you stack them on top of one another and organize them geographically. Here we see some pinpoints in the Stadiumville area, and this area is dominated by interstates, Turner Field, and the parking lots surrounding the stadium. And these pinpoints represent murals from the 2013 Living Walls project. And this cluster of murals is unusual in the city. There have been other years and there are other murals across the city. But this is a strange area because of so many. And a representative from Living Walls explained that this was very much related to the stadium and the history of urban renewal in the area. So we decided to take a look at some of the maps in the Planning Atlanta collection and see what happened when we stacked them with the Living Walls murals that that organization allowed us to scrape from their site. And so here is one of the first maps that we used from the Planning Atlanta collection. It's a land use map from 1952. We also grabbed a housing code compliance map, which shows how Atlanta was planning to use federal dollars for urban renewal project. And then a third map that we decided to use early on was one of the mini Negro residential maps that Atlanta was making at the time, showing where African Americans were moving in the city. When we stack these layers in the ATLmaps platform, we can start making some interesting discoveries pretty quickly. So we have these murals that we saw before, but if we back out, we can take a look at the 1952 land use map, and then we can show what is there now and what was there in the past. The green here represents single-family homes, the red businesses, and orange is public housing and apartments. And so we can see this was a fairly multi-use area next to the downtown area, but all of that is pretty much gone in the Stadiumville area. And now that the Braves are leaving, they're talking about making it back into multi-use. Here we have the housing code compliance map, which shows in the darker lines areas that had been already knocked down for the interstate and for the original Fulton County Stadium, which we can show by moving back and forth with the opacity scroller. Also represented, we have these tic-tac-toe lines where these murals are, where the city had planned on knocking down supposedly blighted areas to build new projects, and then a diagonal pattern that shows areas that were protected. This becomes particularly interesting when we add some of the race maps and take a look at how the city was mapping out race at the same time period. The purple here represents where African Americans had been living, and at least in the early 60s. And then the orange area just shows a few years later where African Americans had moved. This blank area is where the area had already been torn down for the Fulton County Stadium, and so no one was living there. But if we use the opacity stroller between these, what we see is how the urban renewal funds were matching up pretty directly with a lot of the race maps that were being made as well. And so here we can see a white area in Grant Park that was protected, and this African American area, as you approach Summer Hill, was slated to be demolished. When the Braves announced that they were leaving Turner Field, we saw the need for and potential for a larger documentary and started thinking of layers that we could add. One of the first of these was a layer of oral histories, and these oral histories will be what form the Korsakov film documentary. And so with each of these pinpoints, we have fans who are coming in to see the Braves play. We have people from the community, city planners, all talking about different places within the Stadiumville area. So one interesting point that you can see with these oral histories is here we have two African American men and one Jewish man talking about their experiences when they were younger at the Empire Theater, which was a segregated theater. So we see that cluster there. But we're also finding other areas that start to cluster here around an elementary school that's now a retirement home. And we expect to find more as we build the oral history project. But we also see the potential for adding in demographic data, adding in more maps, adding in economic data, and seeing how things match up, what the different layers can say to one another as we build the project.